This is the Citrus Experience podcast, brought to you by Citrus Men. We're passionate about growing premium grafted citrus trees and helping you on your growing journey. Whether you're a seasoned gardener or an emerging green thumb, this series is for you. We share expert advice, insider knowledge and practical tips you can apply because we know and grow citrus.
Hello and welcome to the Citrus Men podcast. I'm Susan Burns.
And I'm Gary Isles.
In this episode, we're going to be discussing, it's a bit of a serious topic, biosecurity. And it's really around how strict our quarantine regulations are and how they've protected us from many pest incursions. But there are some new threats to citrus and our industry, and we're going to touch on those a bit today. So, Gary, we're not going to make it somber and gloomy. It's a positive story. So I thought we might start with a little native pest that has, over the tens of years, particularly in Victoria, become quite out of control, would you say? Let's just have a quick chat as a lead-in about citrus gall wasp.
Yeah, citrus gall wasp, as you said, Susan, is a native pest, and it's it's just part of the endemic pest structure that we've got in the country, and in some areas. Particularly, let's take Sydney. Sydney, it doesn't raise its head very often. It's about, and I see it from time to time, but it's not a major problem. And I think that's because the climate in that area, in the Sydney area, is good for the native predators of that pest. Yes. But then if we go to Melbourne, it doesn't seem to have the predators around, and Melbourne, it becomes quite a problem. So yes, it's regional, but it is quite an issue in Melbourne, and it needs to be dealt with early on when people first see it.
Yes, I do notice. Because I am a Melbourne person and I've lived here all my life, and I do know how much impact the citrus gall wasp is making. I also know it's made a big cross journey over to South Australia where it's having a big impact there. And really it's about vigilance, people not noticing their trees being ignored, where it's easily managed. But if your neighbour has a tree that's not been controlled, the pest being controlled, it spreads rapidly. And I suppose that's what we're saying. Pests can get out of control. They're easily managed, but if they're let to get out of control, they make a big impact.
Yeah, I think the important thing is to think like everything with citrus, where it's seasonal. Like our last podcast, we talked a lot about the seasons, and it's the same in the insect world. So it's seasonal, and the gall wasp hatches out in the spring. So if people would be checking their tree in the winter and having a look for galls on the branches, clipping them off, putting them in the bin, then they're getting rid of them before that pest escapes the gall and goes out to multiply.
Yeah, so it's that the gall is that big swelling that you see. It's quite distinctive on the tree. I think it's important too that perhaps those, before you put them in the bin, that you just run through that gall, that lump with your secateurs or a razor blade just to expose the grub or the instar in there so that it doesn't go and spread somewhere else. Do you agree?
Yes. So anything to interrupt that life cycle. So the eggs are laid in there and they're been growing and the gall's been growing around it. And if you can disturb that, then it stops the life cycle of the pest. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think all that's important. But I think the seasonality is like, don't go and look in November after it's hatched. Go and have a look in the winter before it's hatched and get rid of it. And then we're a big step along the way to living with the pest.
Yes, that's the point, living with the pest. And it is a native pest, and as you say, there are native predators that control it in different regions. So what we're talking about now, what we're being threatened with is, as our world closes and we're less isolated than we used to be, we do have some real threats that have made big impact overseas. And we're going to talk about three today. the citrus greening, the canker, and the Asian citrus psyllid. Yeah. So let's talk about greening, Gary. What's greening?
Greening's a common name for what those of us in the industry call Hong Long Bing, or because that's a mouthful, we often say HLB. So HLB is a bacterial disease. It's a plant disease. It's not a human disease. Not a problem with people, but it is a big problem with citrus. And it's been in Asia. It's in the Americas. It's in Africa, slightly different forms, but it's around the world, and it's been spreading. And it's sitting to the north of Australia. It's sitting in New Guinea and Timor. And it's but our greatest the threat comes from natural movement with the insect that spreads it, which we'll talk about shortly. But the psyllid that spreads it. Yeah, that can be transported on storms and cyclones and that sort of thing. But I feel the biggest threat is illegal imports coming in through our ports and airports, and that's one of the reasons why we want to talk about it today, to highlight how important our biosecurity at those entry points are, and how important it is not to bring plant material of any sort, but particularly with us in our world of citrus, not to bring anything in through those ports illegally. There are quarantine measures, and they can be brought in through a system of quarantine. Takes a couple of years, but it's all worth it. The number of checks to keep our industry clean.
It baffles me why people think that's clever to bring in some plant material that the threat is so impactful. But how has greening affected the citrus industry, Gary? What does it do? I know it's devastated in the Florida citrus industry. It's affected California.
Yes, we'll take Florida for example. Florida had the insect that spreads the disease, the psyllid. Florida had that for many years, but the disease wasn't there. But once the disease came, they had both the disease and the vector. Then it started to spread. Now, it spread fairly quickly, started in the Miami area and then worked its way throughout the state. That industry was a very powerful industry, producing a lot of juice, and that's been reduced by 60%.
Yeah,
so it's a massive impact, and the researchers in that area are busily trying to find resistant varieties, resistant rootstocks, to try and be able to still grow citrus in that area, but it's very, very difficult. The disease doesn't express in a plant for a couple of years, so you can have a tree with the disease and you don't see anything for a couple of years, but then after that, the leaves become mottled, the fruit becomes misshapen, and the tree declines and eventually just collapses. So, yeah, it's devastating. I've been to see it, and it's horrible.
Yeah, shocking.
So we certainly want to try and keep it out of Australia.
Absolutely we do. And I just can't imagine, because we do have a massive citrus industry in Australia. How much fruit is produced? Do you know, Gary? How much space is occupied?
Well, we're about 26,000 hectares. And for us, it's a decent industry. Where production is about 800 million in dollars, Australian dollars, and about half of that, just over half of that goes to export. So it's a great earner for the country, as well as supplying our domestic market. And it looks big to us compared to other countries, where I think China produces 44 million tons. Wow. of fruit, and we produce about 500,000. So it's we're small in a world scale, but big on for us, for our population. We do grow a lot of fruit, so it's very important, and it's jobs. It's jobs everywhere, and also for the home gardener, it's keeping their prized tree or trees in their backyard.
Absolutely,
free of these diseases. So.
Yes. So just going back to the, because we really do want to stress that point before we hop over to how we're protecting the industry. When we're talking about bringing in plant material, we're talking about, yes, that might be you took a cutting from the lovely limoncello that you were in Sorrento on your holiday, or you might have a piece of fruit in your bag or some seeds. But it's also things like people bring in kaffir leaves and curry leaf. That's also it could carry what we call a vector, which is the pest which brings the disease.
You can, yes, the insect can be on those leaves. Also, one of the other diseases that that are on our list today, canker. Canker is a big risk with fruit that hasn't been checked and with leaves that haven't been checked. So you've got it from all angles. So it's just very important, and I think it's just that people don't realise.
Yes.
They don't think they're not in the plant world, and they just think, oh, that'd be nice to take home, and they don't realise what sort of risk that we're taking. So hence the reason we're highlighting this today.
Yes, for sure. So let's talk about we'll talk about canker, because we've had canker here before, haven't we?
We have had a number of outbreaks of citrus canker, and it's a bacterial disease it spreads on the leaves and on the fruit. It can spread on your clothes. You can walk past a tree with canker and spread it.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's
like
on the surface of the plant, a bit like that. That's right. Well, we won't go into lot for it, but
imagine putting a citrus tree. That's just good.
Yeah. But it likes the warmer tropical climates, and we have had outbreaks in Darwin, we've had outbreaks in Queensland, and we've been very fortunate that those outbreaks, the industry and the government agencies have worked very hard, worked together nicely, and put a lot of effort in, and they've managed to eradicate, which is very difficult to do. So they've eradicated it in those outbreaks, but it's devastating, because the region where the outbreak is, then all trees are removed. So all commercial trees, all home garden trees, everything is removed. It's the only way to stop the outbreak from spreading. So it's been tough. It's been tough on the people that lose their trees. It's been tough on the people that have to go and do it, because they have to visit all these people, and commercially, the guys commercially, it's tough on them. So it's very fortunate that we've been able to do that, and we've only been able to do it with the cooperation of industry, government, and the general population. And that's just the only way, when these things happen, that we can do these things, and everybody's got to give a little bit in order for it to work. But in essence, it's a great story, because everybody's got together to get the outcome that we got.
And so how does canker, what does that look like, and how does that affect the tree?
It's a lesion. So it's a lesion on the surface of the leaf and the fruit. It can be easily confused with other endemic diseases that we've got here. So don't run out and look at your fruit and think, oh, I've got canker, because you haven't, because we're checking, industry's checking across the country all the time. So we don't have it in the country. So don't fret if you see a lesion on your leaf or your. So, but it is, that's how it expresses, and it's very, very infectious.
It's an important point that you make, Gary. We as an industry, like, there's many layers, and there are many horticultural and agricultural sectors, but notifications in the offices that go, the information is spread very quickly. If there's an incursion of any kind or something you spotted, everybody's onto it very quickly. I think that's it's not like it gets away. Everyone's very vigilant, and we're well supported in that aspect.
Oh, we are. I'd like to just say that we have people in that world in Australia that are world class. They can walk the walk with anybody in the world. Worldwide, we're about the 30th in the production scale. But we have people that are equal to anybody around the world, and it's very pleasing to see that, and we should be very proud of it.
For sure. I think we should also be very proud of what we're doing as far as protecting the citrus industry and the infrastructure and systems that are being set up. Let's talk about Oz Citrus and the work that they're doing.
Yeah, well, Oz Citrus is an industry body. It's made up of growers, fruit growers, citrus fruit growers, and citrus nurseries. So it's a combination of the two. And the organisation grows all the seed and the buds or signs that we use to grow citrus trees. So they test for all diseases, both endemic diseases that are here already and also for exotic diseases. So we as nursery people can go to Oz Citrus and we can get our seed for our rootstocks and we can get our buds to grow our different varieties and know that we're propagating material that's one, true to type, and most importantly has a high health status. Yes. So it doesn't have the plant diseases that can easily spread by buds around the country. We know that we're going somewhere where there's a clean source, and then the plants we grow are clean and true to type. And that's an organisation that started in a small way in 1928, and it's been beavering away. And now it has a fantastic facility where it's world class, up there with the Americans, with everybody. We're up there. We're doing as good a job as anybody around the world in controlling these diseases. And it's like a general public doesn't know about it, but it's very interesting and again, something we should be very proud of.
Oh, it's a beautiful facility. I'm sure it's developed even more since the time I saw it. But yes, it's really fantastic. I think also what's really super interesting is what we call the repository, which really it's kind of like a citrus tree library, and it's where all the trees are grown. And so to explain, like for citrus men, because all of the stock is coming out of this facility, so it's all clean, as Gary says, the seed is all checked and the buds, but you sort of have to order the book out of the library. So if you just can't, it's not like Gary goes out and grabs a bunch of buds off one of the field trees. You order them, don't you? And then they arrive by post and they're wrapped up, and it's all very exciting when the buds come in or the seed comes in for you to grow a batch of citrus.
Yeah, it's a good story. I'll just speak about the repository for a moment too, Susan. So the repository is the base of it. So that's where every tree that's being propagated in the country has a let's call it a mother tree that sits in that repository. That repository is insect proof. And it has limited entry, and the trees are tested regularly, so we know those trees free of the diseases of concern, and they're there as a library, somewhere to go to where you know you've got the source. So if something happens out in the field, you can go back to that original source. And there's two sites. There's two sites where they're held, so that there's a backup if there's a disaster at one site, a storm or something, then the other site's still got. So there's a duplication, and all those trees are held there for insurance.
Yeah, right. Yes. So important. And as you say, the public really don't know all of that backstory that goes on. And I think the other thing is, we touched on it in our last episode about people that are gathering citrus trees, and there's new citrus trees coming in and new varieties. But for citrus men, they all have to go through this process. We just don't say, oh yeah, just bring that in and we'll have a crack at it. It's got to go through this. And that's years. It's not weeks, it's years.
Yes. Oh, yes. It has to be for a variety or to come in. Then it comes in the system is it comes in as a bud. That bud is then propagated in a facility, in a quarantine facility. It's grown, it's tested. If it's got a disease, it then goes through another process to get a plant that hasn't got a disease, and then it's tested again. So it's not until all the tests are coming through clear that then gets released to industry or to the variety people that have brought it in. It is a process. It's a minimum of 2 years, and I know in this world people don't like to wait, but when you look at the consequences of not waiting, then there's no choice. It's just the system. It's the best system that the world's come up with so far, and it works. It works is keeping those diseases out.
So let's tell ourselves this is what we're doing nationally to protect ourselves globally, but we also do that within Citrus Men. Within Australia, we have very strict guidelines or regulations about moving particular stock, and with citrus, we're not allowed to just ship it everywhere. So you've got to have a certification, and that requires some protocol to have been met within the nursery. And then if Citrus Men can send into Tasmania, South Australia, and Northern Territory, they have to go through a quarantine process. But we don't send into Western Australia, Gary.
No, we can. We can send into Western Australia. We're able to, but the protocols are very difficult at the home gardener level. It's the process is that for a tree to go from us here on the eastern side of the country to go to the west, we have to the tree has to be inspected, it has to be treated, and then shipped. Now that's what we do for Northern Territory and Tasmania. But the issue with sending to Western Australia is, I suppose it's twofold. It's a long way, and sometimes the post takes time. Although our trees do last a long while in the box, I've had a tree returned after a month, dropped a few leaves in the box for a month, and still be fine. So the trees last, but you don't want that. We want it there as quickly as possible. And in the best condition. So it's nice when everyone opens the box. That's right. So, but the issue with Western Australia is that their particular protocol means that we do everything this end, but then they redo it. They want to inspect the tree again, and they also put on a charge for that. Yes. So it's just about impossible to send something by mail that then goes to quarantine Western Australia, gets inspected, and then whoever purchased at the other end then gets hit with another bill for the inspection. So we just put it in the too hard basket, and that's why we don't send to Western Australia. The states we can send to Victoria, South Australia, and Queensland and New South Wales, all under our. We don't need to get an inspector. That's because we've gone through the protocols and we've got the ability to self-certify. The thing that I will mention is that there is no movement allowed of citrus plants out of Queensland into other states, and that's because there is a citrus disease in Queensland that's isolated to that area. It would mainly affect oranges. And we've got some big orange growing areas in the country, in South Australia, in New South Wales, and into Victoria, and that disease would be devastating in those areas. So there's no movement allowed of citrus plants out of Queensland. Mm. So there's it's complicated within the country as well, but we manage it.
And I think the important points here, and looping back to what this whole episode has been about, protecting the industry, the citrus industry, and our home citrus. all these protocols and rules that we're following are easily broken by somebody who thinks it's kind of cheap to buy a tree on eBay. As you say, they might be in Victoria and it might be coming from a backyard in Queensland. Think about, and as you said before, Gary, people don't realise, we hope after this episode that perhaps people have opened their minds up a little bit about the impact that has. Saving $1 on buying a tree from eBay could wipe out a citrus industry. So just people be aware. That's what this episode's been about.
Be aware. That's right. We get lots of requests from people who've got a tree in grandma's backyard or their uncle's backyard, and they say, "Oh, can you propagate this for us?" And we, and I understand that there's a link to that plant, but we have to say no every time because we don't know the history of that tree. Did someone bring it in from another country years ago and it's been sitting in the backyard and it has got a disease that could be devastating? So like we said earlier, we might get the material from the Oz Citrus program, and then you know where you stand. So yes. Yeah, and I mean all those. It never hurts to ask your supplier if you're putting an order in. What's the history of your plant? Yeah. Where did you propagate your plant from?
The provenance. It's important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look, that was a bit sort of heavy. I'm sure our lovely listeners enjoyed it because it is an interesting topic. It's really a bit of a peek behind the curtains of what goes on, and it's a massive support network that we have. We're very, very fortunate in Australia. We've got a terrific and thriving citrus industry, and we have the ability to get beautiful quality citrus trees. And I think the Citrus Men tree is a testament to that and all the good work that you and the team do, Gary. It's fantastic. So we'll leave it there. Positive note. And next episode, we're going to be talking, it'll be a bit lighter. We'll talk about citrus self-care, how they look after themselves. We'll go into pot sizing, and we'll also sort of help people bring their citrus back from the brink. So it'll be a little bit more fun. Not that this wasn't fun. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Susan.
Thanks for listening. For resources and contact details relevant to this episode, please see the show notes. Subscribe to Citrus Experience so you know when the next episode goes live. And follow Citrus Men on social media for more great content.